Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the Russian economy, and specifically to talk about the fact that North Korea is now accused of entering the war in Ukraine. Earlier this year, I reported that Russia had been found to be using North Korean ballistic missiles. US military experts had identified the debris as originating from North Korea, and North Korea was widely condemned for supplying those weapons directly to Russia. However, the head of NATO has now confirmed that North Korean troops are now active on the ground in Ukraine.
Today, I can confirm that North Korean troops have been sent to Russia and that North Korean military units have been deployed to the Kursk region. The deployment of North Korean troops represents one, a significant escalation in the DPRK's ongoing involvement in Russia's illegal war. Two, yet another breach of UN Security Council resolutions. And three, a dangerous expansion of Russia's war. NATO calls on Russia and the DPRK to cease these actions immediately. The deepening military cooperation between Russia and North Korea is a threat to both the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic security. It undermines peace on the Korean peninsula and fuels the Russian war against Ukraine.
Now, I think the fact that North Korea are now supplying boots on the ground, they're actually supplying personnel to help in Russia's fight against Ukraine, has some serious implications. And as Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, pointed out at the end of his speech, one of the major implications is that South Korea is technically still at war with North Korea, and the tension between the two countries remains very high. It's been reported that North Korea have supplied 10,000 troops to Russia so far, and this is causing major concerns in both South Korea, Japan and the USA. And in direct response to this, South Korea have confirmed that they are now intending to step up their cooperation with Ukraine. So they're going to be supporting Ukraine whilst North Korea is supporting Russia. And clearly the problem with that is that tension will continue to rise between the two nations. And one of the other potential risks here is that the USA could allow Ukraine to use its long-range missiles. President Zelensky of Ukraine has been requesting for the past few months to be able to be given the permission to use long-range missiles to attack strategic locations within Russia. Now, up until now, the USA, the UK and the rest of Europe have said that they are not allowed to do that. However, the USA have now come out in response to North Korea sending troops into Ukraine and said that they may not limit the restrictions going forward, and that potentially could open up a whole can of worms. And in direct response to that, President Putin said earlier this week that Russia's defense ministry was working on different ways to respond if the USA and its NATO allies help Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with long-range Western missiles. So things are definitely starting to heat up in terms of the cooperation being provided by North Korea. That is not going down well at all with the Western allies. But it also shows that Russia is now really quite desperate. And let's hear directly from the head of NATO as to what he thinks on this matter.
The deployment of North Korean troops to Kursk is also a sign of Putin's growing desperation. Over 600,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in Putin's war, and he is unable to sustain his assault on Ukraine without foreign support.
Now, this is something that we've been discussing on the channel for the past 12 months or so. Russia is now desperately short of people, not just to fight in Ukraine, but also to serve in its workforce. There are people shortages in lots of different companies, and we've seen a wage spiral which is now driving up inflation. And as a direct result of that high level of inflation, interest rates are now sitting at 21% in Russia, which is the highest that they've been since 2003. And they're actually higher than the emergency rate that was brought in February 2022, immediately following the invasion of Ukraine. So Russia is definitely struggling in terms of personnel right now. And it's been reported that so far North Korea have actually supplied more than 4,000 people to go and work in Russia to help with the personnel shortages. So I think it's fairly obvious to understand what's in this for Russia. They need help, they need more people in order to keep both the war going and also to keep their factories open. But what's in this for North Korea? Why are they getting involved in this conflict? Well, I think there are a couple of reasons. Firstly, North Korea is receiving lots of free trade. So reportedly, it's getting lots of oil and other commodities that Russia is supplying to it, presumably at no cost, in exchange for the help in terms of the military conflict. Also, it's been reported that North Korea is using this as a testing ground. They want to put some of their military into active service, to actually send them into a war zone, send some of their senior personnel, their generals, to get some experience, potentially because they may be planning their own war in the future. Maybe that's the concern from South Korea's point of view, certainly. But also from North Korea's point of view, they want Russia's help with their satellite services because they've been trying to launch spy satellites unsuccessfully because they don't have a lot of expertise in terms of aerospace. However, Russia obviously does have a long pedigree of sending things into space. So let's hear directly from the South Korea spy service on this matter.
North Korea appears to be preparing to relaunch a reconnaissance satellite, utilising advanced component imports and technological collaboration with Russia, following its failed attempt this past May. Although the exact movements are not yet confirmed, there are reports of close monitoring by the spy agency, with the possibility of North Korea conducting its 7th nuclear test after the US presidential election.
So the South Korean spy agency believe that Russia is helping North Korea in terms of launching a spy satellite, and that North Korea may well be planning another nuclear weapon test because North Korea, despite the fact that it wasn't involved in the original round of nuclear weapon development, has developed its own nuclear weapons. And clearly from South Korea's point of view, that is a major concern. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because I think the involvement of North Korean troops in the war in Ukraine is potentially a big turning point because up until now, Russia has been on its own. It's been accused of using weaponry supplied by North Korea up until now. However, there haven't been any boots on the ground. But what we're hearing now from NATO and South Korea is that North Korean troops are now in Russia and potentially are also now in Ukraine. And I think that's causing major concern in Asia. Certainly South Korea and Japan are worried that North Korea are using this to their advantage. They're helping Russia in order to gain things from Russia that could be used against other countries in Asia, particularly spy satellites to be able to see exactly what's going on with military bases and those sort of things, and also potentially developing its nuclear capabilities further. So that's raising some serious concerns. But as we talked about earlier in today's video, the USA have now said that in response to North Korea getting directly involved, they may consider allowing Ukraine to use their long-range missiles to attack locations within Russia. And President Putin has come out and said that if that does happen, then he will deem NATO to be joining in the war and he will take some sort of action in retaliation. And this, I think, is the major concern because Russia is struggling right now in terms of personnel. It doesn't have enough people in order to keep all of the troops supplied in Ukraine and also to fill all of the vacant jobs within Russia. And so there is a lot of pressure that's now building on Russia to do something to bring some sort of conclusion to this war. And it may be that they use this as an excuse to escalate things. And if that does happen, obviously there are major concerns as to what Russia would actually do. Would they actually target any of the NATO countries and risk bringing those NATO countries into the wider fight? Or is this just another case of saber rattling? So the overall summary of today's video is that the reported entry of North Korean troops into the war in Ukraine is seriously bad news in terms of raising the tension both in Asia and in Europe. Russia is now on the front foot. It's saying that if any of the countries that are supplying weapons directly to Ukraine allow them to use long-range missiles to attack Russia, then they will deem that to be a sign that NATO is now involved directly in the war and that they will provide retaliatory action. So hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.